Hello, fourth grade. Welcome to another book club recap. Let's get started. If you could take a look at our book club stats, this is what happened last week and this is what happened this week. So I'm glad to see there's 2 more people participating. And we did some more minutes. It works out to about 235 minutes per person. But you have to keep in mind a few readers in our classroom who read a lot really pulled that number up. Some people are not getting the 30 minutes in at least per day, which is going to be mandatory, okay? So you want to make sure you're reading and you're not falling behind on your reading skills. If you take a look at our minutes per student, if you remember, 3rd and 5th grade are also doing this book club challenge. So you can see that we read the biggest average minutes per student, more minutes than 5th and more than 3rd, so we want to keep that up for next week as well. So goals for this week, we still want to be reading 30 minutes a day. Everyone participates. And these were last week's goals, to beat Miss C's minutes. So as you can see, Miss C's minutes. I kept track just on a whiteboard that I have in my apartment, and I read a total of 336 minutes, which it works out to be about 5 and 6/10 hours. But I wanted to show you all this because to show you that sometimes 30 minutes a day, I don't want 30 minutes a day to be you dreading it, putting on a clock, putting on 30 minutes and waiting till it's over. Reading should be something, if you're picking the right books for you, reading should be something that you're looking forward to. I know not everyone loves it. I did not love it when I was your age. But guess what? It's okay if you don't read for one day. You could see on Monday I was really busy. I didn't read at all. But that just means that I made time later in the week to read a little more. I had a lot of time on Tuesday. What I've been doing is just bringing my book or my Kindle when I go on a walk. So it's really nice to get outside during these times. So I just take my Kindle on a walk and then a half hour goes by really quick. On Thursday, sometimes, you sit down to read and then you get up, have dinner, and maybe read a little more. As you can see, I had 2 little reading sessions. So I wanted to show you guys this to show you that reading, you should be reading as much as you can. It shouldn't be a dreadful, put on the 30 minutes and get going, okay? So this is just a real life sort of schedule of me getting in as much reading as I could last week. My goal is going to be to beat 336 minutes, and it can be yours too, to beat me again. I need to catch up quite a bit because I haven't been reading as much as I would like to this past 2 days. Okay, in one of your questions last week for book club, it asked you to make a connection, and I think we need to be a lot better about that. Just to remind you, if you're making a text-to-text connection, it means you're connecting something that's happening in your book to something that happened in another book. If you're connecting the text to the world, maybe you find similarities in something that's happening in the world and something that's happening in your book. Lastly, text to self is, can you relate to one of the characters? Maybe it reminds you of yourself, one of the characters, or it reminds you of someone you know, and you would explain why. So some of our connections were just a little shallow, or you were just saying like, I liked it, and that's not a connection. So let's not lose our reading skills just because I'm not sitting there with you doing it. Remember, to make these connections meaningful and not just surface level connections. To remind you, even just 20 minutes a day, it makes a huge difference. So as I've said to you and I've said to your parents before, the only way you're going to become a better reader is by reading. So you can take a look at this chart. I showed it to you guys in the beginning of the year. But just 20 minutes a day, you're exposed to so many more words, and you end up being in the 90th percentile. And don't get me wrong, I know in these times, sometimes you just want to lay around, play video games, and even just catch up on some sleep. But do your best. I want to see some more effort this week as we all sort of get used to this new type of school. And believe me, I'm right there with you. I'm like this girl sometimes. And that's okay. But let's get in as much reading as we can as possible this week. So great job so far. I know this has been tough trying to adjust to all this, but we can do it. I felt like I needed to take back something that I said earlier in this year when I said,
you don't actually need electronics.
Because I guess we do need electronics these days for distance learning. So I appreciate you doing all of your work on your devices, in your workbooks, all that. So I appreciate that. Now let's get to the recaps. First, we have Gabby, who is still reading A Series of Unfortunate Events. She was crushing it this week. I saw her last Wednesday, and she was saying how she was trying to beat me, which I meant to mention. Her picture is just chilling over here. She is the only one who beat me last week. So I read for 336 minutes, and she's read for about 10 hours, which is about 600 minutes. So she almost doubled mine. So one of her connections was she could connect this book to the other books in the series because a lot of them have really gloomy settings. Next up, we have Edgar. Read for 30 minutes a day. He really likes that Captain Underpants is a good book for kids his age because there's action, comedy, and a lot of silliness. And it has a crazy long title, which I like. Okay, Grace Wallace is next up. She's reading Goblet of Fire, which I believe a few others are reading. I know the twins are. Cougar, Philip are all into the Harry Potter series on different books right now. I liked how she made a connection to herself. She could see how her friendships are really similar to the friendships between Harry, Ron, and Hermione. They're good friends, stick up for each other, so she could find connections there. Next up, we have Cougar, who, like I said, is reading Harry Potter. Let's get those minutes up this week, Cougar. You got this. Did a good job. What he read this week was they were trying to catch pixies. Ron, Harry, and Hermione were. Next up, we have Nick. He's reading the books by Dan Gutman, where they're doing lots of wacky things, getting in trouble, and the principal snapped into nowhere. So keep it up, Nick. Next up, we have Grace Steele, who read Babysitters Club. I really liked her connections. She was saying how she can connect because sometimes she babysits, so she can connect to the characters in that way. And then also, her mom used to read these books when she was younger, and that's the first thing when I saw that you were reading this that I was going to say, because I read them when I was growing up too, Grace. So, although you notice that it says Babysitter's Club, and it's by Raina Telgemeier. I never know how to say her name. So it's a similar story and basically the graphic novel version of the books that your mom and I read, which were actually by Anne Martin. So it's very similar. But yeah, very cool. So that's the first one, I believe, of the series where they just come up with the idea. And Grace did a good job summarizing how they all were babysitting different kids, but then they came together to start a club for it. So I'm excited to see how she likes that one. All right, next we have Jacob, who's still barreling through all the Roald Dahl books. This is another one I have not read, so I'm interested to see what you think of it. He's saying it's really suspenseful. And the characters just came up with a plan to ruin a fancy party where people from all across England come together. They're trying to ruin the party because this guy who's throwing it is mean to their friends and Danny and his dad. So I'm very excited to hear what happens to that party. So he could make a connection to the other book that he read by Roald Dahl, the BFG, because they are connected in this story and they mention the BFG. I like how he connected it to another. He actually connected to the Rugrats, which I'm sure everyone will appreciate. All you Rugrat lovers out there. He could make a connection to Rugrats because Chucky Finster does not have a mom, so his dad has to do mom stuff or things that moms typically do. And then same for Danny. He's in that same sort of situation that Chucky is in Rugrats. So good connections there, Jacob. Next up, we have Ethan, who's still reading Percy Jackson. Again, one of my faves. Really, really good book. So he recapped and he made a text-to-self connection that even though this book is a science fiction like mythology book, he could still find the connection that even though some of the things aren't like realistic in the book, that they still play some of the same games that he plays at recess and PE, like capture the flag. Okay, Clarissa, good work. She's reading Clementine for Christmas. Her connection was that she connected the book to herself, saying that the character had something that she didn't want anyone at her school to know. And sometimes, like, we all have secrets or things that you'd rather keep to yourself or maybe just have your family know. So she was saying how she could understand the character in that way. Next up, we have Sotiti, who is reading one of the Dogman books and also still Greek and Roman myths. He could connect to the Greek and Roman myths because he is Greek, although some of the Greek and Roman gods, he said, have different names. Next up, we have Ben. He is reading Call of the Wild by Jack London. So he just started reading this book, and I really liked his connections. He was saying he could really connect to the character in this book because the character, Buck, had a routine and a usual schedule, just like he did, because usually in a regular world, we would go to school, come home, have a snack, do homework. But then suddenly everything changed in one day, just like it did with this pandemic. The character's life changed in one day also. He saw another connection that Buck, the character, adapted really quickly and to his new life, and Ben's been able to do that too, which is awesome. Good work, Ben. All right, so our goals for next week, we want to still beat 3rd and 5th grade in minutes per student, and I want to challenge you guys to have some juicier responses. Some students are just kind of putting minimal answers, and I can't really get as much of a feel for what you're reading and what you're doing. So same expectations as when we're in school. So full sentences, complete thoughts, and thoughtful responses. I want to make sure that you are reading your answers before you submit them, because sometimes I can tell all you had to do was reread it to make sure you had it all correct and not any silly mistakes when you're writing, okay? All right, good work. Hopefully we can have full participation next week. And I'm going to leave you with a little treat from a band called Pink Trinket.
I want to go see the trees. I want to go see my family. I want to go home. 'Cause I want to go home. I want to go see the trees. I want to go see my family. I want to go home. I want to go see the trees.
All right, good work, Pink Trinket. Good job, everyone. I will see you hopefully tomorrow at our math review.